Okay, for those of us who are here on time, welcome everybody. This is the December 12th meeting of the Florida Talent Development Council, and the meeting is called to order. So thank you for participating. Specifically, Representative, thanks for being here. I know you guys have just started your first day of special session, so I appreciate when those of you who are the most busy are actually here. That goes a long way, so thanks for doing that. We do have a couple of new members who have joined the council or been appointed to the council since our last meeting. One is Senator Doug Broxson, who was appointed by Senate President Pasadomo. Senator, I don't know if you're on the call. And it doesn't appear that he is, but we may give him just a minute to say a few words once he does join. And we also have here today one of our newest members that was appointed is not here today, and that is State University System Chancellor Ray Rodriguez. Unfortunately, was unable to be here, but Emily Sykes is going to be here on his behalf. With that, Jeannie, if you would, go ahead and call the roll. Hey, Emily.
Okay.
Bob Ward.
Here.
Senator Doug Broxson. Representative Alex Andrade.
Here.
Michelle Dinner.
Here.
Laura DeBella. Adrian Johnston for Secretary Dane Eagle.
Here.
Senior Chancellor Henry Mack for Commissioner Manny Diaz.
Here.
Mark Wilson.
Here.
Municia Brown. Emily Sykes for Chancellor Ray Rodriguez.
Hi, here.
Chancellor Kathy Hebda.
I'm here, thank you.
Chancellor Kevin O'Farrell.
Here.
Robert Boyd.
Here.
And I'm not sure if we have Sue Edwards or Alan Mortham standing in for Sue.
This is Alan. I'm here.
Thank you. And I don't believe a quorum is present.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate it, Jeannie. All right, based on that, I'm going to go ahead and talk about the agenda, and then I'll tell you how we're going to move forward on the agenda. So for today, our plan was or is to vote out the strategic plan based off of the several-hour conversation that we had at our previous meeting. We were also going to approve our last two meetings minutes with a quorum, and then we have a nursing trend report that was due to the legislature by its December 1st deadline, which we've already turned it into the presiding officers. But based on where we are right now on a quorum, I'm going to go ahead and defer items 2, 3, and 4 from the agenda. We'll move those down to the bottom of the agenda, and we'll come back and address those at that point. And we will move forward to the nursing trend report. We'll come back to those items if we end up having a quorum before we adjourn today. So, if you will recall, the legislature had previously placed in our purview some nursing trend data to provide to the legislature by December 1st. There was also a provision added in that Senate bill last year that required the council to take a look at and report on nursing loan forgiveness programs. And so the REACH office has been very engaged on this issue on behalf of the TDC, acting as a staff to assist us with that project. And Mark Baird and his team in the REACH office have been working on that with the various players, many of which are here in the room represented on this call. So the REACH office coordinated a survey to go out to various institutions, and Mark is going to give us an update on where we landed by the December 1st due date, and then also talk to us a little bit about some steps moving forward. So, Mark, I'll go ahead and turn this over to you, and you're welcome to begin your presentation.
Thank you, Chair Ward, and good afternoon, everyone. Let me see, I'm going to share my screen and get this PowerPoint in front of you. And going to do presentation mode. Okay, and everyone should be seeing the title slide.
Yeah, Mark, let me interrupt you for just a minute.
Sure.
I just realized I forgot to do one thing administratively.
Sure.
With moving everything around. So, first of all, a couple of administrative items. Please make sure that if you're on your computer, on your phone, if you could mute while Mark's doing his presentation, that'll be helpful. Secondly, all of the materials that you're going to be seeing, including this presentation, is available on our website, www.floridajobs.org/Talent Development Council. And all the materials for today's meeting have already been pre-posted on the website. There will be an opportunity for the public to give comment at the appropriate time, so please be prepared when we call on you to be recognized at that time and not before. So, Mark, my apologies. You are recognized to move forward.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. All right. Let's see. Share. Wait a minute. Oh, I had it. Why am I on to? Oh, hold on a second here. Am I still sharing my screen? I'm not sure.
You are not.
I thought it. I'm not. Okay, so let's do that. And there we go. Okay. So as Chair Ward said, this is this report is required in the Talent Development Council section of statute 1004.015. And it is due annually by December 1st. However, our plan right now is to sync up the report with the legislative cycle. So in the even years, we will be rolling out the report by December 1st. And then the odd number years, we will have an earlier release date we're planning on October. So that we're trying to provide useful information to the policymaking process. In general, we're talking about in this report 10-year trend data for both RN, registered nurse, and LPN, licensed practical nurse programs. And the registered nurse programs can be at both the associate level, or ASN, or a bachelor level, the BSN. And we're addressing all of those there. The data includes information on the number of slots that are available for student nurses, application and acceptance data, the number of graduates produced, retention and graduation rates, licensure exam pass rates, and one thing was added last legislative session, and that was, Chair Ward alluded to this, was information on a loan forgiveness program for student nurses, or I should say graduates from nursing programs. The reach office role here is to coordinate this effort. The heavy lifting is done by our education partners, the Board of Governors, Department of Education, the independent colleges and universities of Florida, and the Council for Independent Education. They are the ones who are gathering this data. And we try to coordinate that effort, and we are compiling it into the report that you'll see. Now, there are some challenges with gathering this data. Because of the nature of the data, it's not these data are not available in the central state level administrative databases that are operated by our partners. Therefore, the data is collected through a survey of institutions. So it's essentially self-reported data by the institutions. And the Council for Independent Education, CIE, has a special challenge as well that the other education partners do not have, and that is they have constantly, there's a churn of new institutions coming online and institutions that are rolling off. So there is they're not dealing with a stable population of institutions across time. As opposed to the other sectors. So that is a special challenge for them. Also, they do not, CIE does not have as comprehensive a student level database that the other sectors have had for years because of the nature of their mission and their the institutions that they administer. So that is the other thing that CIE is that is particular for them is that because you have new entrants, new institutions coming online, institutions may be licensed to operate in Florida and to offer nursing education, but with a provisional accreditation. They are not fully accredited until they, they're given a time period, a provisional time period in which they can operate, produce nurses who can then go on, take the licensure examination, the NCLEX, and become nurses. But the accreditation takes place after they've been in operation and they've met benchmarks, performance benchmarks that are required in the accreditation process. So they have so some of their institutions are accredited, some of them are non-accredited or have this provisional accreditation. And what we've seen is that among the non-accredited institutions, their performance is lower than is substantially lower than the accredited institutions, and also the response rate is much lower than that of the accredited institutions. So, and that's something we'll be talking about at the end when we talk about next steps. Dealing with some of our data challenges. And this I consider this as a work in progress. It's just going to get better and better, and we're going to be bolting on new components to it. The USF Center for Nursing is doing some great work on nursing education, and including a survey of licensed nurses to see how many are ending up in the field, and then going on and surveying mid-career nurses to see if they're progressing along nursing pathways. If, for example, you have associate level RNs who are going into bridge programs and becoming BSNs. If you've got LPNs becoming RNs, that sort of thing. So that's going to take some time. They're on a 2-year cycle, but they are working on that. And there is some the center is going to be rolling out a report very shortly this week, I believe, that's going to be looking at the characteristics of programs and the students and faculty and NCLEX passage rates. So there's a lot of stuff in the pipeline, including some things that are eventually going to be included in this report. So we do have a bit of a caveat with some of the data, especially the aggregate data and the CIE only data. But I think there are still some things that we can, that are interesting in this report, and they can be conversation starters and things that we can explore further and ponder. First off, in terms of the pipeline. When you look at the 10-year trend of submitted applications and acceptances, there have been a growing number of applicants, both in the RN, that's on the left-hand side, and the LPN programs on the right-hand side. There's been a growth in the number of applications, and there's a gap between students accepted and applications. However, the biggest gap is between the total applications submitted compared to the students accepted, as compared to the qualified, quote unquote, applicants and students accepted. So there's a growing number, it appears that there's a growing number of folks who are applying who are not meeting some minimum prerequisites or requirements for admission, and the institutions are not considering them to be qualified applicants. We have not done follow-up work on this as of yet to find out what that actually means, and I think this is some homework for our education partners. There was some discussion of this last week at our REACH implementation team meeting. Is that we might want to dig a little bit and determine what that means, and if there's anything we can do to maybe mitigate that, maybe something upstream. In looking at the whole pathway, is there something where we might be able to, in a sense, patch up that pipeline so you have more qualified applicants? So at the end of the pipeline, you have your graduates. So we looked at the beginning of the pipeline, and this is sort of the end of the pipeline is production of graduates. And you can see in RN, the RN on the left-hand side, graduates. Recently, there appears to be a bit of a downward trend. Now, keep in mind also that 2021 is the first academic year affected by the pandemic. Okay, so it's going to be interesting to look and see what happens, in the following years to see what is a trend and what is maybe a blip. We don't know as of yet. It looks like FCS, that's the Florida College System institutions, look to be bucking the trend on that RN side. It looks like they produced substantially more graduates in 2021 compared to 1920. And in terms of the LPN, fairly steady. And again, there's a slight upward tick among the Florida College System institutions. Again, the CIE, you may want to take with somewhat a grain of salt because of our relatively low response rates. But we're working on that. Okay, and talking about, sort of the middle part of the pipeline in terms of retention and graduation, we developed a new measure, and that was to see, among all of your students enrolled in the prior year, how many either graduated in that prior year or the following year, or were found enrolled in the following year, fall and spring. In other words, did they finish and graduate, or were they continuing on and retained in the program and moving along in the process? And you can see there's some room for growth here, room for improvement in that area. And that is something else that could improve the flow in the pipeline is retaining and graduating your students at a higher rate. The NCLEX exam, that's the licensure exam. The rates are relatively high. And you see there's that dip in the CIE. Again, somewhat of a grain of salt there. I wouldn't hang too much on that at this point. But I think the overall story there is that the rates are relatively high and relatively stable. They bounce around a bit, but that is probably kind of more statistical noise than anything else. So maybe some room for improvement there, but maybe you're not going to get a lot of bang for your buck focusing on on that issue of the pass rates among your graduates. I mentioned before that we have some new data that's required in the report, and that has to do with a loan forgiveness program for nursing program graduates. And then this is in section 1009.66 Florida statutes. The program, through the program, the graduate can be repaid up to $4,000 a year for up to 4 years. The DOE provided us this data. The DOE administers this program. And in 2021, there were 322 graduates total who received $1.2 million, and which averages to $3,729 per graduate. Most of these graduates were from BSN programs, bachelors of nursing, RNs, 242 of the 322. And most of those graduates worked in teaching hospitals. 250 of the 322 graduates were working in teaching hospitals. Okay, so next steps, and before we know it, there'll be another one of these rolling around. So we're going to get more bites at the apple as we move forward, and we are going to kind of continuously try to improve this product. We're going to work on addressing data challenges, and we've talked. We've talked to Meredith Pelton with CIE, and we have a strong commitment from her to work on improving the response rates among the institutions, particularly, as I said, the provisionally accredited or non-accredited institutions, and we'll do whatever we can to help in that effort. We are one thing we were not able to get into the report. DOE is still working on this, and actually there's some issues as to how to operationalize this requirement that comes from the law, because it's not real specific. But this is the length of time with employers among nurses who receive loan forgiveness funding. And so that's something we will look forward to in future iterations of the report. Another requirement that was added last session was information about the line and pipeline programs, and they are just being implemented right now. So it's really it was too early the funding hasn't rolled out, and it was too early to really say anything. But as we move forward, we'll be able to talk about who's receiving that money, and eventually we'll be able to talk about what their performance looks like compared to institutions that did not receive the funding, for example. And I mentioned before that we expect to get some rich survey data from the Center for Nursing on graduates who become employed as practical professional nurses, and look at their movement through the career pathway in mid-career. And that'll be really exciting to see. I think it'll be some very useful data to see moving forward. And I believe that's it. I think you're on mute.
Mark, if you would go ahead and close your screen just so I can see the audience a little bit better.
Sure.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So members, as we said earlier, we did meet the statutory deadline to get that information in. There are still some challenges on the data. I think Mark and the Reach office have done a yeoman's job of really working closely with the institutions represented on this call today. And Raina, Dr. Lottenau, thank you for also weighing in from the Center of Nursing early on to be helpful. And I think that relationship's only going to get richer as we continue to work together on getting additional overlap and synapse between what you guys are doing and what we're doing. So thank you very much for stepping up and helping us this year as well, just specifically to understand a little bit better how everything is going to work from the Florida Center for Nursing's standpoint. So let me open it up for questions. Any questions of Mark Beard about his presentation? Anybody? All right, I'm not seeing or hearing anybody. Mark, thank you very much. Appreciate your hard work there, and thanks for helping us meet our deadline statutorily. Appreciate it.
You're
All
welcome.
right, I believe we have a quorum now. Jeannie, can you confirm that?
Yes, I saw that Laura DeBella joined the meeting.
Okay, perfect. All right, we're going to go ahead and move then to back to the items that I deferred, which from your agenda, I'm going to go back to my introductory comments on the strategic plan and give you an update on where I believe we are. But let me get back to where what you all should have received in your member packets. First of all, obviously, you had the agenda. You had a transmittal memo from me giving you some instructions about how we were going to handle the strategic plan. Then we had our meeting minutes from October 5th, the meeting minutes from July 12th, and then you had the original strategic plan that we did back in 2021. And finally, you had an update, which included a tracing table so that you could track back to the actual original strategic plan and where the initiatives were. So let's go to the approval of the minutes. So we will start with the October 5th minutes, and then we'll move to the July 12th. And again, both of those were in your packets. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of for October 5th?
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions regarding the minutes or any concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. By your vote, show the meeting minutes for October 5th are approved. Moving on to the minutes of July 12th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for July 12th?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any questions or concerns about the minutes for July 12th?
Mr. Chair,
Chancellor Hebda, you're recognized.
it's not a question or concern, just a couple of noted non-substantive typos in those minutes. Can we just
Okay.
share those with staff for correction
Please.
after they're adopted?
Yep, please.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Hearing none. All those in favor of approval of the minutes for July 12th signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed,
Aye.
no. Okay, by your vote, show the motion approved for the minutes on July 12th. Now, moving on to the workshop for the strategic plan. The staff spent for the Reach office, if you'll recall, when we met on July 12th, we spent well over 2 hours going through the strategic plan and literally tactic by tactic, strategy by strategy. And as I said in my transmittal memo, I don't want to do that exercise again. What I would prefer doing is simply going to each of the 5 goals, stopping or pausing at that point to see whether or not there are any comments or concerns or edits needed. The instructions that I had sent out at the when we sent our materials out to you all specifically stated that anyone who had any edits or changes should have prepared any notes or specific edits that we could all view together. We have not received any. So my second concern is whether or not you all have had enough time to look at everything. I do realize that we sent that 7 business days ahead of this meeting. And so I'm going to just pause for a minute to get any feedback from any members that felt like they didn't have enough time to review the material before we met today. So I'll just open the floor, and if there's anyone that feels like they have something to say, let's go ahead and have you chime in now.
Hey, Bob, it's Mark Wilson, and I don't want to speak for the group, but for the Florida Chamber, a little bit more time would certainly be appreciated. I'd love to be able to weigh in a little deeper if more time is available.
Okay. Anyone else that felt like they did not have ample time to go through the strategies and tactics?
Hey, Bob, this is Bob Boyd. I'd second Mark's comments.
Okay. Anyone else? Any discussion about the comments made by those on the call about needing extra time? We don't, just a reminder, we do not have a statutory deadline this year in terms of getting it in. I think if we were to get it in January, there'd be sufficient time to do it, but I don't want to make you all feel like you're having to continuously meet. All right, hearing no further discussion, I'm going to make a leadership call here. I think we're going to defer the final consideration to January. We'll buy some extra time for the business community and others on the call, the ICUF schools. I think it's probably a good call. If there are any edits, get those to us in advance. January's meeting will only have 2 items on the agenda. The first will be to take the vote on each strategic goal, one at a time, and then we'll move on from there. We will consider any edits at that point as well if there are any, but we should be pretty well baked at this point. The Reach Office staff did a significantly strong effort in rewriting the strategic plan, getting rid of a lot of redundancy. You'll see through the tracing table, it's a much smaller document. And in addition to that, they also were able to incorporate the many changes that we presented during that, as I said, 2-hour plus meeting. So moving forward from here, let's show that deferred to January. The second thing that we will take up on in January is a beginning point for our discussions on articulation and the 2+2 system. For those of you that were not on our last call, there's a general feeling out there in talking to the governor's office and others that maybe the synapse with articulation between the institutions, the state colleges and the state university system could be made a little stronger. I think we need to figure out whether or not those general feelings are true. And so we'll begin in January with an initial presentation just to build some background and be able to have some understanding or better understanding about how the system works and what some of those issues might be. So any questions about as we move forward in January, or any questions about the upcoming agenda items?
Hey, Bob, this is Bob Boyd again.
Yeah.
Do you have a date for the January meeting?
Yeah, it's a good question, Bob. It's going to be later in January. We are going to try to do our best to work around legislative calendars, which generally would mean like a Monday meeting or a Friday meeting, particularly during the interim committee week. And in addition to that, I think after that January meeting, we'll be putting a doodle poll out tomorrow to you all to go ahead and get your feedback. But in addition to that January meeting, I think the council will not meet again. I mean, we met in October, we met in July, and we met in December. And now we're going to meet in January. I committed to you all that we would try to have only quarterly meetings. So I think we will not meet again until after the regular legislative session. I just don't want to be in conflict with members that have been diligent about making these calls. And I know particularly the agency staffs and the rest of us have legislative duties as well. So we will not meet again until after the regular session from there. Okay, seeing
Hey, Bob.
Yeah.
Bob, Mark Wilson again. Hey, I have a question for you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. Maybe this is a professional staff question as well, but once we get everything in, say in January, we've got a final product and it goes through the whatever process next. What is there a vision of when all of us, chambers of commerce, economic development, state colleges, ICUF, Department of Education, is there a date sometime in 2023, career source boards, where we would all, have a dashboard where all the groups, whenever they meet, would be able to be using the same common set of data? Is there a vision for something, when in 23 that's going to come together? Despite, like, the report we had today on nursing was phenomenal. Obviously, a lot of what we're doing on this group is technical, but the opposite side of technical is all of us being on the same page with gaps and focus and skill sets and, demand for jobs. And I'm just curious if there's a vision of, when that sort of go live date might be, so all of us who are finalizing our 23 plans can work around it. And if we don't know, we don't know. I'm just wondering if there's a vision of when that might all be, sort of all of us would be, launching the common dashboard and common data.
Yeah, Mark, we discussed it in the year one that we all got together and met right after the TDC was put together. And I think that that's a worthy goal. It has not been planned for yet for 2023, but I think it probably needs to be. I know the first goal was to get everybody to agree to the same set of data. And now that we have EMOP and those licensures for EMOP just went out last Friday, I think that's probably a great conversation that maybe we should add to the agenda in January as to what that dashboard would look like and what it's going to contain. So the short answer to your question is, yes, it's on the agenda, but I think we need to have further discussion about how and when we make that materialize.
Copy that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions before we move on to the next part of the agenda? Okay, hearing none, is there anyone from the public that wishes to address the council? Now's your opportunity to do so.
Mr. Ward,
Yes, Mr. Harris.
how are you, sir?
I'm well, thank you.
Good, yes, very briefly. I'd like to address Mr. Baird's comments. I've represented schools that are licensed by the commission for about 40 years. He made a couple of comments, and what I'd like to do, if I can, rather than boring you all, is, Mr. Baird, if you'd be willing to chat with me after, just a couple of comments you made about accreditation and provisional license and all that, if we could talk about that, just to make sure that this group has all the correct information about the CIE schools. If that'd be okay, I'll contact you directly.
Sure. Yes, I'd be happy to speak with you about it.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Anyone else?
Bob, this is Henry. If I may go back to Bob Harris. Bob Harris, is there a larger point about CIE that you are suggesting or want to make that would be of benefit for the group to hear?
Yeah,
or is it more of a data in the weeds, wonky methodological sort of question that's specific to Mark? If not, I'd benefit from hearing your perspective if it's a broader point.
It is. Let me. I appreciate Dr. Mack. Thank you. Number one is there's a lot of conversation about data and looking at data specifically for nursing. I represent about 25 or 30 nursing schools and have for 25 years, and so very familiar with the situation. One of the things, if you're looking at data such as retention, those kinds of things, because a lot of the report that was put out, Mr. Baird talked about retention rates and those other things, is it has to be an apples and apples look-see, you know what I'm saying? So I think part of what you need to do when you're gathering that data is making sure that the data is comparable. Let me just say this, many years ago, there was a thing passed in the feds called SPREE. I'm not sure if anybody remembers that. Bob Ward may remember that. But this was an effort to say, let's look at all the education groups, ICUF, state colleges, community colleges then, universities, the commission licensed schools, and make sure that you come up with what the data looks like. What is retention? What is placement? What is graduation? What is passage rate, all those kinds of things to get on the same page. And the purpose was that when you actually review the data, that it was you're looking at the same data, look the same way. For example, what we learned at that time was for the state colleges, again, at that time, community colleges, was that their retention rates were in the lower level, many of them. But the reason they called it accountably enrolled students, don't know if that still exists, but they only started counting students after a certain period of time as part of as part of what they looked at. Well, the same thing here with, for example, nursing. A lot of the institutions, and we found out this information from ASIN, which is the programmatic accreditor that Mr. Baird was talking about, the accreditation agency, the primary one, was that a lot of the public institutions don't count quote unquote nursing students to be in their program until they've actually completed all the gen ed and get up to the nursing core part. And so when you talk about things like passage rates or retention rates, you're looking at something entirely different. When a CIE school takes a student in, if a student starts on a Tuesday and drops on a Wednesday, that's counted against that institution. And so when you're talking about looking at data, you just have to make sure it's an apples and apples thing. The second thing is this, second broader issue. Mr. Baird talked about accreditation and the difficulty with schools that are in provisional status. All CIE licensed schools start in provisional status and they stay in that status for a year, which means they can operate, but they cannot really grow that program. Can't make any changes at all while they're in quote unquote provisional status. Well, in 2014 was when the legislature passed the law requiring all institutions, nursing programs to be accredited, meaning programmatically accredited, not accredited, institutionally accredited, but programmatically. And they gave all the institutions 5 years. As I got up and testified in the House and the Senate back in 2014, that's not enough time. And so what you're seeing is a school must exist for at least 2 years before it can become institutionally accredited. And most schools have to be institutionally accredited for at least a couple of years before they then can become programmatically accredited. It just takes time. So a lot of the institutions that Mr. Baird's talking about that are provisional status, they're in that status because that's what the law requires them to do. And it takes a while before they can actually become fully licensed and certainly then become institutionally accredited, and much longer to become programmatically accredited. So again, I think you have to look at the apples and apples. When that law was passed in 2014, every public institution in the state university, community college, or state college, were all programmatically accredited when that bill passed. That was not the same with the CIE schools. It just takes some time to go all the way through that process.
Thanks for that clarification, Mr. Harris. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Mack, for the question.
Any other questions or comments from the public? Hearing none. Before we adjourn, I'd like to just thank the staff, particularly Jeannie Boggs, Mark Baird, Molly Weller, Kim Bain, and the staff of DEO, Allison Hopkins, for all of their hard work and support for the efforts of the TDC, and also, of course, the Governor's Director of the Reach Office, Katie Crowfoot. Thank you all for what you do to contribute on our behalf. Everyone have a wonderful couple of holiday weeks, and we will look forward to seeing everybody back in January and expect that doodle poll to be on its way to you sometime tomorrow. Without any further objection, we are adjourned.